Good day, folks. You are listening to the Quarter Horse Hauler with Ryan Fleetwood, and today I have the privilege of doing an interview with the current AQHA President, Mr. Jim Hunt. Mr. Jim, thank you for being with us.
Well, Ryan, it is a privilege to be here, and of course, we're meeting in Calgary here at the Stampede, and that makes it extra fun.
Yes,
to be around, here in Calgary. I haven't been back since the 1980s when I used to rodeo a little bit, and so to join you and the other horse enthusiasts here, it's been really fun.
Yeah, that's great. And you've got to take in some of the Calgary Stampede events, and how's that?
Yes, it's been great. Got my wife Joni is with me, and of course our time here has just been just a lot of fun the last 3 days.
Yeah, that's great. And we're filming here on site at Kildare's Ale House in South Calgary, and want to thank them for the ability to be here. So, Jim, tell us a little bit about you and your life. What brought you to the point of joining the EC, the Executive Committee at AQHA?
Well, thanks. Let's start with a little bit of history. So I am a quarter horse breeder, American quarter horse breeder, and my children, we have 7 children, and we continue to follow tradition of breeding the greatest equine athlete in the world, as we think. And they're the 6th generation.
Great.
And so my grandfather was Spanish. His name was Alberto Francisco Lopez, and he came to South Dakota in the 20s from Colorado, New Mexico area, and he was employed by the Diamond Day Cattle Company back in the 20s. And they leased some ground in South Dakota, part of the Indian Reservation, the Cheyenne Indian Reservation, and came up there, and they brought with them a remuda of horses from the South, a lot of them from Peter McHugh line, Joe Moore line, some of those old foundation quarter horse lines.
Yeah.
And then he stayed there, and when the Diamond Day Cattle Company folded in the 40s, their remuda, their horses, their broodmare band stayed there because they had didn't feel the need to take them back to New Mexico. So they basically became somewhat wild. And so my grandfather knew that there was these good genetics that was there. And so then in the 40s, he began to gather those wild horses and comb through and pick the best mares out of those herds. And then when AQHA, of course, AQHA was formed in 1940. Mm-hmm. So in the mid-40s then, my grandfather got some of the inspectors from AQHA to come up and inspect those mares, and the ones that were approved got registration certificates. Mm-hmm. Fun part of the story for those that are rodeo historians or enthusiasts, the young man that he took under his wing to be his partner was Casey Tibbs. And Casey was just a young boy at that time, and so Casey helped my grandfather gather and break and train some of those wild horses, and then remained one of his partners in the horse business for many years to follow. So we have a fun history, and then of course I am part Lakota, being raised on the Cheyenne Indian Reservation, and have a kind of a fun tidbit there. My great-great-grandfather, his name was Frederick Dupree. He was French from Canada. And he came down into the Dakotas as a fur trader, a buffalo hunter, and fell in love with a full-blood Indian woman by the name of Mary Goodelk's woman, and married her. She had 1 child when they married. She'd lost her first husband in a war. And anyhow, Frederick Dupree married Mary Goodelk woman and had 7 more children, one of them being Fred Dupree Jr., my great-grandfather. But what's interesting about that story, Ryan, is that in the 1860s, 1870s, there was a big storm called the Great White Storm. It was a huge, massive snowstorm that went through the Montana, Wyoming, the Dakotas. It basically wiped out almost to extinction, the cattle herd, the buffalo herd, and horse herds and so forth. Well, history books show that there was about 600 cattle left in all those 5 states, and not many horses left. And after the fur traders came in and basically hunted out the mature buffalo, there was 5 orphan buffalo calves left total. And they were up on the North Dakota, South Dakota border. And Frederick Dupree, my great-great-grandfather, and Mary Good Elk Woman took a team and wagon and went up and captured those 5 orphan buffalo calves. Took them back to the Cheyenne River Reservation and grew the buffalo back into existence. And so with the buffalo and the livestock, and then that's my Lakota side of the heritage. And so I just feel so blessed with not only that part of history, but then in the horse side of things. I've never known, not knowing anything but good quarter horses and the history behind them. And so years later, well, you know, my grandfather also, Lopez, also had one of the first quarter horse sales in South Dakota, and Casey Tibbs was his partner. We still have that sale bill. And, you know, from that way of life, I didn't have much choice but to remain in the quarter horse business and breeding good quarter horses. And as a young boy, we would go to Hank Wise camps in Colorado. We would go to Texas, to the Wagner Ranch. We would go, you know, to the King Ranch. We would go looking for better outcrosses, looking for horses to make our herds better, make better genetics. And then here, you know, about 10 years ago, I was approached by, at that time, the executive vice president and the president of AQHA, Johnny Trotter and Don Treadway, and asked if they thought that I might be interested in being a part of the governance of the American Quarter Horse Association. And because of my history and because of my family's involvement with the quarter horse, I finally was led to, you know, think, well, maybe I could have something to offer. And so Ryan, the AQHA had gone through a trend of time where memberships were on the decline, registrations were on the decline, in turn, transfers were on the decline, and so on and so forth. And a lot of that, you know, good horses and breeding wasn't on the decline because there was so many other affiliates or other entities. You know, this quarter horse industry has become so specialized. There's the NCHA and the NBHA, and there's the Reining Cow Horse Association, and there's the racehorse deal, and the rodeo world, and on and on and on. And so AQHA had found themselves, and this is from my observation, had found themselves somewhat in a corner in that really the main ones that were interested in AQHA was the show horse world. And so, but here we had all of these ranch breeders, Canada, United States, even Mexico and other international countries, but especially in the United States, we had all these ranch breeders that had these quality quarter horses, but the AQHA had kind of lost their identity in being involved with those breeders, or the real importance. And let us remember that the American Quarter Horse Association, founded in El Paso, Texas in 1940, was founded on the ranch breeders' efforts. They were founded on those good old foundation horses, the Joe Reeds, and of course, that was way before 3 bars, the Joe Reeds, the Joe Moores, the Peter McHughes, you know, those horses. And then later, 3 bars, a thoroughbred came in and was proved to be maybe the greatest thing that ever happened as an outcross back on these foundation horses. But in 1940 in El Paso, and so then the AQHA's purpose was a breed registry to help enthusiasts that wanted to make better horses identify by pedigree, by genetics, and it grew and it grew and it grew and into the 60s and into the 70s, and then in the 80s, it didn't keep up with what it needed to offer to the members. That's my observation, and still had a purpose, but it didn't stay current with needs changed for breeders, and they didn't keep up with recognizing the breeders and their efforts as efficient as they needed to, and so they lost a lot of momentum. And so, of course, then we get in, to the late 90s and into the 2000s and the 21st century. And so here we are. And some of then the governance found that they needed to step up and reach out and regain the value, that integrity back with the breeders. And so that's about that time is when I was confronted and asked if I would consider getting involved with the AQHA, and that maybe I could, being a ranch breeder, being raised by a ranch breeder, coming from a ranch breeder's family, and understanding their thoughts and their needs, that maybe I could have something to offer. So became a director of AQHA in 2012. And then served as, we developed a ranching committee, ranching council, trying to address the needs now again of our ranch breeders and addressing those incentives that we needed to reach out and better recognize their efforts and their breeding programs and good horses, and getting involved and reaching out to the other affiliates that many of those same genetics were needed and used in the cutting horse industry, the rope horse industry, the barrel horses today are a great cross of not just race and run, but they got a lot of cow horse breeding in them too, a great combination.
Yeah.
So specialized. Anyhow, I then after I was a director for about 5 years, I was sought out by some of the past presidents to consider going on the executive committee. And after much thought, and here I am. And so this is my 5th year, and the way that works is it's a 5-year commitment on the executive committee, and each year you're elevated. If you're voted back on each year by the past presidents and the general membership at each convention. And so they have thought enough that I've had enough to offer that they've kept me on. And so I have the privilege, and I say privilege, of serving as the president of AQHA this year. Yeah.
Well, I can't tell you how much that we Canadians appreciate you coming up here. And I know you have a super busy travel schedule with all the places that you're going and all the people that you're seeing in this final year on EC as the president. Can you give us some of the things that you would like to see move forward that you will see as legacy things that you've done at AQHA? Oh,
yes. Well, one of the things about the executive committee that I learned the first 4 years, the executive committee, those 4 members can make motions and vote, and the president only gets to have a voice if it's a tiebreaker vote on issues, whatever. And we have not had that issue at all this year. Thus far, very unified, the executive committee. But, one of the things that I came in on the executive committee and will go out as president, in that my objective is to solidify the efforts of re-engaging many of those breeders, ranch breeders, members that have become disengaged. How have we done that? We began the Ranching Heritage Program. We've increased the importance of the Remuda Award, the highest award at AQHA awards once a year. We've better improved the recognition of horses in high school rodeo and college rodeo and the professional rodeo. We're working on some things, we hope, with the Calgary Stampede and recognizing horses, the American quarter horses here. And Ryan, you and I have talked about this before. And I again want to make this statement, not being braggadocious or sarcastic, but just being realistic. And that is, if it was not for the American quarter horse and that horse being involved in our Western culture, in our way of life, we wouldn't be wearing cowboy hats or boots. We wouldn't have a rodeo. We wouldn't have the Calgary Stampede to the level that we have it, because that horse, that is the nucleus. That is what we focus around in our Western way of life.
The one commonality.
The one commonality
of all of us. And wouldn't it look different if the American quarter horse didn't exist?
Oh, again, your athletes, these calf ropers, and Canada known too from Kenny McLean, way back before him, Herman Linder, all of these iconic Canadian cowboys. Again, just think where they wouldn't be part of the history books if it wasn't for that horse.
The horse.
The quarter horse.
Yeah.
And you're right. We would not have the National Finals Rodeo. I mean, these horses, we see interviews all the time, and very passionate that if it wasn't for my horse, I wouldn't go up and down the road making a living. If it wasn't for my horse, I wouldn't be the calf roper or the team roper that I am today, and on and on.
Yeah. And the stories that people get into, if it wasn't for my horse or my horses, I wouldn't have met this person and this person and this person. And it isn't always just about the horses that we see in the spotlight that are the competitive horses that have won this or won all of these titles. It's also about the horses that each of us hold in our hearts as family members.
Yes.
Who have introduced us to other people or carried our parents or grandparents or children at certain times or for years and years. Those horses and those stories are so important too.
They're a part of our daily lives. And my wife and I, that is another prime example of that scenario, Ryan, and that is that she was not a rodeo gal. She was a ranch girl. And they had a set of brood mares that they used on the ranch, and every morning she was out, saddling her old saddle horse, going to get the milk cow in or the cows in, or just ranch, or just her true enjoyment is just getting out and riding and seeing the country and just on the ranch, looking, going through the cows and checking them or checking the fence or whatever. And our first common bond was the horse. When she found out that that my family raised quarter horses, and I found out that her family raised quarter horses, that was our first common bond. And so we've been married 37, going on 38 years, and that's still our enjoyment together is our horses.
That's great. And you have some kids who enjoy horses too? 7
children, and they're all grown pretty much now, but all very involved in our production sale that we have every fall, and involved. They participated in 4-H and in high school rodeo, and some of them in college rodeo and so forth. But none of them, further than that. Now they're at home on the ranch and use the horse at the ranch, and the horse is their best friend, and just kind of following suit of mom and dad. So
there's so many of us in the horse business that I think if we were to take horses away, our identity would completely change. I know mine would. I wouldn't be anywhere near the same man that I am if it wasn't for horses.
Yes, absolutely true for myself. I wouldn't be Jim Hunt in the American Quarter Horse headquarters if I'm knowing that, well, he's the guy that has a really good set of quarter horse mares and some good studs and so forth. And I take pride in that. I mean, you don't seek those things. That's just the measuring stick that people know you by.
Yes, sir.
Or I go back home to South Dakota and I'm a director at the Black Hill Stock Show and other events. Why? Because of my association with the horse and the horse community. Mm-hmm. And those are the credentials that we have because of the horse, because of our passion for the horse, and because what the horse means to us, what he's done for us.
To each of us.
Yeah.
Indeed. I want to shift the focus a little bit, Jim, and talk about one of the questions that I have for you is that we've talked a little bit about how the quarter horse is bred today and the discipline-specific breeding and the discipline-specific uses for our horses. And there's not nearly as much focus put on the old versatility of the quarter horse. Inside of the association now, I've thought for a long time that there's only one commonality that we all have under the umbrella of the AQHA, and that is the necessity to get a registration paper from that association. Would you say there's any other commonalities to everyone across the business in the AQHA?
Yes. There's, I think, other commonalities, and that is the commonality, whether it be hanging on to the old foundation lines or whatever. The commonality is, I want to make a better one. Whatever it takes to make a better one. And Ryan, we have seen through the history that some people have put all their efforts in going back and trying to find as close to the old genetics as they could, and thought, I want to go back and get what they used to have because that was the greatest in their mind. Well, I've seen people that have stepped outside of the box and they come to AQHA and they want to outcross with some thoroughbreds or some other breeds and say, AQHA, would you ever consider letting me register as an outcross some of these? Usually hasn't happened. 3 Bars was one of the great outcrosses at AQHA. Of course, he's AQHA Hall of Fame, what he's done for the quarter horse in that industry. And the beginning of the quarter horse was not its own individual breed. It was a quarter horse. It was a compilation of different breeds. Yeah. And so, but to keep it pure, they've made it AQHA to keep the breeding, the pedigree pure. They have been very strict about what they allow to come in as an outcross and what they would allow to be registered in the association, because they didn't want to let it to get out of control. But the commonality is in any of those avenues is the desire to make a better one. We're all competitive. Whether we want to, our neighbor's got another horse across the fence, we want ours to look better than his, so we're competitive. So we're going to breed. Or if you're a barrel racer, or if you're, especially a dad or a grandpa of a barrel racer, you want that girl to be first, and you're going to, you want the best one out there, and to make a better one, find a better one, breed a better one.
And to look good while she's doing it.
And to look good while she's doing it. That's correct. Yeah.
So, I love to talk about breeding decisions and how they're made, because I believe that that's a major crisis facing the industry today. So how, Jim, when you were making your breeding decisions at home, what factors come into play for you as to how you decide which stallion is going with what set of mares?
So when I first started, got out on my own, I followed my father and grandfather, and they spent a lot of time studying genetics back in the day. We spent a lot of time at Hank Wise camps when I was a little boy. And we bought, my father had a son of Leo and a grandson of King. And you know, my observation growing up and breaking a lot of those fillies and colts as 2-year-olds. And, you know, I observed that there were lines, pedigrees, there were genetics that were more consistent than others and crosses that really worked. For an example, if you go back and if you study the success of performance horses, and then when I say performance, I'm talking cutting horses, rope horses, barrel racing horses, you know, back in the day, even quarter race horses, short track horses. You know, Leo, son of Joe Reed II by Joe Reed P3, it comes out as a standout in that there was a common denominator that the majority of Leo's daughters, when they were crossed on the son of 3 Bars, a horse by the name of Sugar Bars, that Sugar Bars and Leo cross over all the generations of the AQHA produced very predictable genetics. They were athletic, they were trainable, they had good minds, they had good bone, they had, you know, had the quarter horse look. And even to this day, whether you're talking about, so let's think of Sugar Bars and Leo. If you look at Colonel Freckles, you're familiar with Colonel Freckles.
Yes, sir.
You have a stud now that is out of an own daughter.
Yes, sir.
I had a son of Colonel Freckles. You know, look at the track record of Colonel Freckles, what they've done in the cow horse world, the cutting horse world. Now, also in the calf roping horses and team roping horses, so much athletic ability and sense, common sense, and cow sense.
Disposition. Yeah.
Colonel Freckles, his daddy was Jules Leo Bars. Jules Leo Bars was an own son of Sugar Bars out of a daughter of Leo. So then you go to Freckles Playboy, be a 3/4 brother to Colonel Freckles. Who was he? He too was out of Jules Leo Bars and out of a different daughter of Leo.
Right.
Okay, let's go to the barrel racing world. And there was a Canadian barrel racer here by the name of Lindsay Sears that was very successful. And a world champion barrel horse, world champion barrel racer several times. And she had a mare by the name of Martha. That was her nickname. And she was an own daughter of Dr. Nick Barr. And there was much success with the Dr. Nick Bars. Well, what was Dr. Nick Barr? He was a son of Sugar Bars out of a daughter of Leo. Then you go to Flit Bar, and that was the sire to Dr. Nick Barr. And then Flit Bar was the sire to Firewater Flit, and to, you know, many Flit Bar bred horses. Flit Bar was the son of Sugar Bars out of Flit, the old daughter of Leo, out of a daughter of Joe Hancock. Those horses today are still prevailing as successful performers. Today, we're talking 50 years later. Now let's go to some of the good calf roping horses. There's Joe Beaver, Cody O, world champion calf roper, and he roped on a mare of Sid Miller's for a good number of years, and a mare that they called by the name of Pearl. And Pearl, what was she? She was an Oto bred mare. She was out of a Wonder Oto stud. Oto was a son of Sugar Bars out of a daughter of Leo. In fact, Oto and Flit Bar were actually full brothers in blood, because Julio was the mother to Oto, and Flit was the mother to Flit Bar, but they were full sisters. So they bred Sugar Bars to full sisters. They got Flit Bar and they got Oto. I shared that because trying to be a student of genetics, what crosses worked? Well, they did.
Mm-hmm.
Why did they work? And the other thing, Leo was an inbred horse. He was one of those horses that they bred Joe Reed P3 back to his sister, and they got Leo. Well, Leo himself had some deficiencies. He had crooked knees. There was some inbreeding characteristics that did come out. But down the road, his daughters were some of the best crosses and broodmares back on the outcross 3 bars horse, Sugar Bars. And when they bred 3 bars to some Leo daughters, they worked phenomenal. There was your outcross breeding. People are still trying now to bring in, other outside genetics, and that is the one thing, Ryan, that is an issue that we're going to have to deal with. We have now, years later, we have our genetics. There's such a closed pool of genetics that there has become danger in that, well, what do I breed to next? I don't want to get too close here. And there is where there's probably time and need to allow maybe some other thoroughbred lines in, which in recent years, some of the racehorse lines have been allowed in for some outcrosses, and they've been working well here and there, and that's all going to be trial and error. I was a student of genetics, and so when Joni and I got married, we went and found and bought 2 sons of Sugar Bars, 2 of the last breeding sons of Sugar Bars, and built our broodmare band around Sunny Sugar and Time for Sugar, and then we had a couple of daughters of Leo, and we tried to duplicate what had already been successful without making too many mistakes.
And so when you were making those breeding decisions for your own program, would you say it's entirely based on the genetics of the horses that you're looking at mating, or primarily? And then what other factors are you using when you make your decisions?
And that's a very good point. And it is, no, not at all totally about just the genetics. It's about equally the conformation of each horse and the way that they move and their athleticism and their trainability. Because, I have 7 children, and there ain't one of them alike.
There's and they're all full siblings.
And they're all full siblings. Yeah, guaranteed. And anyhow, they, and not one of them are alike in stature or in mindset or in, some learning comes easier for than others. Mm-hmm. Some are more ambitious than others. Some, well, our horses are the same way.
Yeah, dude.
So, but to get predictable genetics, my first lesson was past history. Mm-hmm. I had call your past breeders, Bud Warren and Jerry Wells and Hank Weiskamp and on and on. They had already been through all of these practices and failures and successes, and my grandfather and my dad. I use a lot of their input as well, because they knew already. I mean, they spent a lifetime, of successes, failures, things that worked, things that didn't work. The other things that we could add to that is okay, conformation is important. And even though you got 2 sons of Sugar Bars, they're both totally different in their conformation. There's similarities, but they're totally different at the same time. Yeah. Same way with their trainability. Some horses, they come around quicker, and sometimes the horses that take the longest to train, if they're still trained right, end up being your better horses. But, in today's world, trainability is so important. Yeah. The mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, the mind.
Would trainability be interchangeable with the word disposition?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. That's what I assumed. I just wanted to make sure that you were thinking the same thing as what I was assuming you meant. And so what would you say then, if I ask you, what is the single most important, what is your first consideration when making breeding decisions? Just one.
Conformation. Conformation leads into the way they move and they travel. Conformation a lot of times dictates if a conformation is correct on a horse, then the trainability is going to come easy for them because they can move correct.
Sure.
There's less frustration. And the less frustration you have with an animal, then the better disposition they're going to have.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Indeed. And when you're making those breeding decisions, are you putting the same type of mare with the stallion, or are you putting a little bit different type of mare with that stallion in order to try and come to the middle?
So, Ryan, some of both, because for an example, if I'm trying to, when I had Sonny Sugar, a Sonny Sugar bars, he was 15.3 and he weighed 1,370 pounds. And he was bigger than what a lot of people liked in today's age to ride. I liked a 15.1, 15.2 hand horse, high withers and a longer pencil neck, and that could get out and move in the conformation. And now those horses didn't conform as well to what's needed in the cutting pen today. Today in the cutting pen, you need a horse that's extremely low to the ground and that can get down in order to compete. That's the way it's evolved.
Yeah.
And so, but to cross Sonny Sugar back on some Freckles Playboy granddaughters. We had a son of Freckles Playboy too. So we can't, for an example, and they were 14.2, 14.3 hand horses to get a balance there. And if we were had orders or we had customers that said, "Boy, could you raise me some really good calf roping prospects?" Well, they wanted something about 14.3, 15 hands, but that could get down on the ground and park it and get back. And so, but that Sonny Sugar, that Sugar Bars line, they had some speed and just natural trainability. So when we were trying to raise some calf roping horses for the kids or for some customers, we made the decision to put those types of mares with the bigger, high-weathered stud.
Mm-hmm.
If I needed to replace some brood mares in my broodmare band, and I wanted good minds and maybe a little heavier bone to keep bone in our horses. I like a number one size shoe foot on a horse, primarily. And in our ranch area, a good foot is very important.
Sure.
And so, then I might put a Poco Bueno. We had some Poco Bueno bred studs at one time and some Poco Bueno bred mares. And I might make sure that they weren't brothers or sisters, but maybe breed them back to keep a little more of a foundation in some of those brood mares, knowing that then I would breed those fillies back to a 15.3 and Sugar Bars horse that needed some more size. So it depends. Different objectives merited different breedings.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Where do you stand on adding thoroughbred in at this point, whether it's in your own herd or in the quarter horse in general?
Well, I'm a proponent of good outcrosses, and again, the simple fact is that the American quarter horse was derived upon a percentage of thoroughbred blood in our horses. It goes back to conformation. If there's an individual thoroughbred horse that came into and I'm not saying that this at this point can be done, but down the road, I think the American Quarter Association and its directors and breeders, the people that make it work, they're going to be forced to look at some possible outcrossing and allow some thoroughbreds back into the deal. Now, you can breed a thoroughbred to a quarter horse mare and get appendix papers, and that is what they're saying today. That there is a chance for outcross, and then you take that appendix registered horse, and if you get so many points on it, or if it wins something, then it can get permanent papers.
Yeah.
So there is a track to some outcrossing that way.
Sure.
But to answer the question, would there ever be room for a full thoroughbred to come in? I think so. I don't know when that'll be, but I think it needs to be visited. I sure do.
I certainly agree with you. I know that years ago we were entirely focused on the old foundation horse, and then I got a mare who helped me change my mind. And she was 75% thoroughbred and a daughter of Rugged Lark. And when we bred her to our cow horse stallions, we got this same type, like a cow horse type, but they had a little more height and a little more length, and they were real clean in the neck and how they were put together, and a great wither and some of those things. And I thought, maybe I'm missing something here. And I think that there are certainly things that the thoroughbred blood can bring us and offer us. Jim, you and I could talk about this all day long.
Yes.
I'm sure of it.
Yeah.
I love it. Great conversation, and thank you for your knowledge. But I want to turn back a little bit to your role with AQHA.
Okay.
What do you see as the biggest hurdles coming at AQHA in the future?
The biggest hurdles are the ones that we have been addressing, and they're still hurdles. And that is, Ryan, that we still have not regained I don't want to use the word respect, but regain the confidence back in our association that from breeders, the breeders, and of course we are a breed registry, but the breeders have not been had their needs met like they should have, and it's to nobody's fault.
Yeah, it's just the way it's gone.
It's just the way that it's gone. Yeah, but those needs of our breeders, and especially, our 50-year breeders, and there's still so many out there, and even 75-year breeders, there's still some out there that are actively breeding. But then you get to your 30, 20, and 30, and 40-year breeders, many of them still feel that what place does AQHA, how can they benefit me? All that, all I register my foals but how can they benefit me? And as I come to Calgary, and as I talk to the Canadian group, the quarter horse group, and the same message that I tried to reveal to them, and that is that AQHA needs to continue to do a better job of recognition. We need to reach back out and recognize the success of those quarter horses from those breeders wherever they may be. Like you and I talked. Maybe it's just on the ranch, the enjoyment of your horse, to go out and get your milk cow in or work your cattle or whatever. To many, it's maybe the success of them raising their family, whether it's through 4-H or youth activities, or they just get to go to play days or whatever. Yeah. But on a bigger scale, to recognize the successes of the horse. The Calgary Stampede, help me with his name, the pickup man, that got Horse of the Year through AQHA. Yeah. It was huge, a huge honor and award. And that we finally have begun to go beyond AQHA and go out and to those breeders and where their horses are at and congratulate them, pat them on the back, whatever the case may be, and say, good job. Man, that was a good horse. Yeah. Your breeding efforts were so worthy there. Right. And you know what? Most of them will go home and say, I think I'll make a couple more like that. I'll breed some more. Sure. Because they appreciated me. Yeah. And so your question about, Jim, what are your ambitions? My ambitions are to continue to do a better job of reaching out, meeting the needs of these members that have been disengaged and new members coming in, and to better recognize the quarter horse wherever they're being used.
I think that's just wonderful. And I think that that's a great priority to set the association back on the path to. And one of the things that we talked about that we can talk about again is not only just recognizing those breeders, but asking them why they made the decisions that they made and what brought them to the point of creation of that horse. Because breeding, as you well know, Jim, is a whole lot of science and a whole lot of art form that can't really be explained
Yes.
in the way we create these horses. And I think telling the story of the people who create the horses will help move the future creation of horses into a more proper direction.
That is so well put. And one of the other things that, the AQHA has lost some involvement in is just that. We used to have trainers and breed, Buster Welch's and trainers, and he was a breeder as well. And he had so much advice and counsel and wisdom to offer to the membership of, this is why I bred this to this. This is how a horse should move. This is how a horse needs to move if you're cutting a cow. This is how a horse needs to move if you're working cattle out in the... There's a difference.
Yeah.
And there's reasoning. Them guys lived in the saddle, lived on a horse.
Mm-hmm.
They know.
Mm-hmm.
And just to add to that, and I hope for the comfort of your viewing audience or whatever, AQHA has made some really huge efforts to re-engage some of that knowledge. For an example, 2 years ago, they allowed me to establish the Ranching Council. And it's 8 members that are like elders now that give advice, that give their opinion, their input. Don't do this, do this. Your breeders need this, they don't need this. And that Ranching Council is comprised of Remuda Award winners, 50-year breeders, or both. Most of them are both. That means that they're the real deal. They've born, raised on a ranch, born, raised on a horse, born and raised as compassionate breeders. They know what they're doing. And from Terry Stewart Forrest to Martha Armitage to Rob A. Brown, some of these families, they developed the American Quarter Association. They were some of the first founders, their families.
Yeah.
And I was so blessed to be able to get them convinced that we need you. We need you back. So Ryan, AQHA has been missing some of that wise counsel. And so 2 years ago, we developed the Ranching Council, and they are from the type of school, if you got something that I can help with and be involved in, I can do some good, okay, I'll be there.
Yeah.
But if you don't, I'm too busy. You know what I mean? They're the real deal.
Yeah.
And so the ranching, segment of AQHA has evolved in the last few years as a positive thing. And I think we have yet to see, there's so many good things that are yet to come.
I can't tell you how much I appreciate, and I know that a lot of our listeners will appreciate your prioritizing the AQHA back, shall I say, in the direction of being a breed organization. And it's not that I personally find anything wrong with the sport part of the organization or the competitive side of the organization, but I think that it's true that the tail is wagging the dog sometimes, and that there's a very small percentage of people who walk into the competition arena, and I'm happy for them to do so. That's great, and it's a necessary part, but it's not the only part. When in fact we have a larger percentage of people involved in the association, whether they be members or enthusiasts of the breed, who are just recreational.
Exactly. No, you're right on there. And again, I think that direction has been given, and we are moving toward recognizing the quarter horse in whatever field they're being successful at, not creating an event for them to go compete at, because we are not a show management organization, not supposed to be. But as a breed registry, we can discover and research and see where our American quarter horses are being successful and what different venues they're being successful in, and then go recognize that breeder and that success.
Sure.
Then you're supporting your breed, your horse, the owner, the competitor, but we should not, we were not developed to create events for the horses to compete at. And
at this point, there are so many associations, as you pointed out earlier, I mean, you can list the big ones, the NRCHA, the NRHA, the NCHA. And then after that, there are regional associations and different groups that form associations to be sport horse organizations and to be competitive. And I just don't know that I think that the AQHA needs to try to compete in that area when really our primary directive is to be a breed organization.
Very good point. And you're right on target.
Yeah.
And we've needed to refocus and again become a breed organization. And and so we are presently in contact with some of these now what we consider to be worthy affiliates, the NCHA and the NRCHA and the PRCA and all of these any of these other events where they're using the quarter horse.
Yeah.
Then yes, let's go recognize them and give them a plaque or a trophy or things that and then tell the world about the success of that horse and how they were bred and who bred them. That's what a breed registry is supposed to do.
Absolutely.
And that's where we're trying to get back to.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. One of the other things I wanted to bring up and talk to you about is, of course, something that's been a pretty contentious issue in facing the AQHA lately, and that's digital registration. As the AQHA president, where do you stand on digital registration?
Well, and I'll just shoot from the hip, Ryan, because of my upbringing and my historical, it's kind of like, are you a Ford man or a Chevy man? Or, well, some people, as long as they run and go, it don't matter. But some are, I'm a diehard Chevy man, or I'm a diehard Ford man, or whatever. Well, Jim Hunt, because of my grandfather and my father and my wife's father, and I love tradition and I love the paper certificate. Mm-hmm. However, in the technology phased world that we live in today, it's coming that the digital system is prevalent, moving quickly, and it's going to be here, and we're going to have to learn to adapt. I don't like it personally. I'm on my personal side, but on the other side, I can see that it's coming. Like we talked earlier, like online banking. Wow, the old school. I want a $100 bill or 10 of them in my pocket, and well, now we got plastic cards, and that's what everybody's going to. If you're going to function, you're going to have to adapt. However, today, still, the AQHA is still trying to perfect that technological system, that computer system, and we're not there. We're not ready for the full-time digital system. And the measuring stick on that is just like registration applications. Today, 85% of our members that register new foals still use paper form. Hmm. So that's not ready for the computer system. Yeah. So digital certificates, and you were there, Ryan, at our last convention. The message was pretty loud and clear from especially our foundation breeders. And they're still the ones that have given their lives to breeding the American quarter horse. They want that paper certificate. Mm-hmm. And they're buying their memberships, they're paying their dues, they're paying the bills. They deserve to have what they want at this point. Yeah. But when you ask, where are we at? Because it's been proposed twice now that we mandate digital certificates. Yeah. The word mandate is a no-no word to grassroots producers. They should have a choice. And if they can adapt to the digital certificate, then I think you phase into it, and if they become comfortable with it. And again, number one, the computer system at AQHA has still got some quirks in it that we're working on. Once it does become totally efficient, easy to do, click of a button, I think that it's going to be more and more accepted all the time as time goes on. But today, we cannot mandate digital certificates.
Yeah.
They have been beneficial in international countries, overseas. And I'll just explain quickly. So, you know, the mail by plane or sometimes mail gets lost. A lot of times, if for an example in Germany or Italy, either one, they register their colts, they send applications over. It might take them 60 days to get their certificate in the mail. Or digitally, the click of a button, they can have it in 60 seconds if everything goes smooth. Yeah. So there is value to them for the digital certificate.
Having spent 3 years on the international committee before I got onto studbook and registration, I have had the benefit of having a lot of conversations with those international members, and they're chomping at the bit to get to digital registration just for those reasons. There are 4 months from the time they send it in to the time they get a registration paper back can be 4 months or more.
Right. Yeah. So that you know that's self-selling. I mean that's a necessity at that point, that we have to take advantage of technology in that case so that they can get their certificates in, or if they sell a horse and they want to transfer that horse now so that the new owner can go compete on the horse or use the horse or you know, we have to try to accommodate that. And it's there.
I think that you used the term measuring stick earlier. I think that a measuring stick that we can probably use with the association is once we've gained back the credibility, the reputation of the association and their ability to process the work and more of it digitally, then maybe we'll be ready to phase in somehow.
Yes.
Digital registration. Once people trust that work can get done properly, because the old reputation of inability persists, whether we like it or not. But I know that it has changed and it's gotten better. There's been efficiencies made and all sorts of things go way quicker now than they used to go. So I think we're headed in the right direction.
Oh, I do too. And the other area that we're headed in the right direction is the team and the staff within the AQHA building. And my first time on the executive committee, when I walked in there, not knowing, you know, still a student of how it all works, I'm still learning, but one of my observation is the turnover in the staff was very rapid. And if we had a employee that was there for 9 months to a year or something, and then we would get them trained and they would move on to a better job, and there was a lot of uncertainty within the building because of the lack of technology or the lack of just who's in charge and so on and so forth. And Ryan, that atmosphere and that attitude has changed dramatically, and to the comfort of our registration department. They're such a team today, and our journalism department is such a team today, and our finance committee, we finally we're ahead of on our accounting practices and measures. We've had less turnover in the last 2 years than AQHA's had for decades, and people. I'm so pleased because I asked them personally as I go there and as I walk the halls of that 3-story building, 220 some employees, how are we doing? Are we doing okay? Oh, we're having a good time. We're enjoying this. We're enjoying working for the AQHA members, and we haven't seen that for a while. Right. And so to your viewership, your listeners. We have got so many things yet to do, but we have done so many positive things in the last number of years.
I agree.
And I think we're again headed back to the right direction that a breed organization needs to be. And we've got my fellow EC members are just wonderful.
Yeah.
We're very united.
Yeah.
And it's really been a privilege this year to serve AQHA.
It's a strong group in the EC currently.
It is.
Jim, to bring it towards a close here, tell us what you're most looking forward to in your last few months on EC.
The last few months on my EC, and of course it'll go till next March, and is again, just like what we've talked, is that I want to leave the AQHA, leave it better than I found it, and that should be the objective of any EC member, and we've had some incredible past presidents. I'm very fortunate that, we had a new hire, Carl Stressman. He's came into the building, as I call our wagon boss. Yeah. And Carl has just been a godsend. Carl and his assistant, Aaron Ingot, and the camaraderie that they've developed in that building, and they'd all take a bullet for one another. We're very fortunate that Carl Stressman was willing to come out of retirement and be part of AQHA for hopefully even now another couple years or more. As I get ready to leave AQHA, I want the members, to feel confident again, to feel that it's a privilege and really an honor to be a member of the American Quarter Association, and that their horses that mean so much to them, that their registration certificates, whether on paper or digital, that they have value. That's, that's my goal. As they did when I was a young man. I was taught and trained that those certificates, there's a registration certificate on old Brownie right there. And that's worth more than what's in my bank account. Value. Yeah. That's my objective.
Me too. Yeah, me too. Well, Mr. Jim, I just want to thank you so much for taking the time to do this with me, and for all those that take the opportunity to learn and listen, and for being here in Calgary and sharing your knowledge, your expertise.
Thank you so much. And to the membership and the viewers, thanks for letting me serve as your president this year, and I look forward to, and I won't go away. I'll still be involved, and I'll get to be on some committees to follow and so forth. But it's really been fun to share, to bring back to this association what I think my parents, they're both gone now, but would be pleased that I'm giving back to something that's been a huge part of our lives.
We talked about a lot of great things in there as far as I'm concerned. We brought forward your message from AQHA and of AQHA, and then of course talking about breeding. I could sit and talk about that for 3 hours with you.
Yeah,
so.
I could too. And there's so much more. I get up at night and I'll just preach to Joni, we need to do this, and this is why, and then I get, well, I better keep, that's my personal opinion. And usually though, she eats it up, and then Joni's an incredible student. And her folks, her dad had a grandson of King, and he had a grandson of Poco Speedy, grandson of Poco Bueno. And, and they had really good mares, Palomino mares. They were Palomino breeders. Okay. And so, but she didn't have the exposure to the coffee table talk of, every morning I got up with my, from the time I was a little kid, pancakes, Cairo syrup, and coffee. And they drink coffee, I drink milk. But anyhow, I'd get up. My God, what about that bay out there yesterday? I think we better try that cross again, and then Dad and Grandpa and my uncle, and and here's why. Or what about that old gray horse, pretty snuffy? I don't think that didn't work, And every morning, it was we was 30 or 40 horses. They'd go over, and I'd just sit there and listen, I didn't. That was our conversation.
I totally get it, because like you, all the older generations of mine are gone now. But those were the conversations we had too. And I find that now they're the conversations I'm having with my wife and my children about the crosses and the foals and what they're turning out like, and how and why, and what you'd change about them if you could, and all those things.
Yeah.
Indeed. So, very good. Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. So this is the mare Kuro Nova, mare we call Nova. And Nova is a bottle baby that we raised
out of a program that I know and respect. I used to do some pedigrees for them at their horse sale annually. Nova is just under 20% line bred back to Colonel Freckles, and there's some little Peppy Sand Badger, smart little Lena in her background. Nice mare, big sizable mare. It's really hard to find good mares to begin with, but especially good black mares. They're super hard to come by in my experience. And then her colt here is a son of Silver Assured, so he is a Silver Bay colt, and he has, as you can see, some of his mama's size and length. This is a really, really good colt. He's going to be a super pretty gelding in the future, not only of course to look at, but he's going to be easy to deal with, easy to teach things, just like the whole Silver family. They retain information, they're brave and quiet-minded, easy to be around. I always find it an interesting thing, because I think that all of us who are breeders say that about everything that we breed. But I tell you, the proof is in the pudding for me on these Silvers, because time and again when people buy them, they come back and say, this horse is so quiet and so easy and so brave. And I say, I know they are. They're really wonderful. They're wonderful in their disposition, and disposition has to be number one. And it's got to be the most important thing that we focus on as breeders. For example, this colt, I love the setup of him, the way he's built, his neck, wonderful neck on this colt. All that counts, but it can't count over top of what's between their ears, because if there's nothing between the ears, or they're generally disagreeable in their disposition, the rest of it doesn't really matter. Is that good? Oh, it's a good spot, hey? It's a good spot.
So in closing on this episode of the Quarter Horse Hauler, I just want to again thank my guest and our esteemed leader and president of the AQHA, Mr. Jim Hunt. Thank you, Jim, for being here. I want to thank Kildare's Ale House in Calgary for allowing us the space and the ability to record here for a day. And if you have any opportunity for me in the future, I can be an MC, announcer, auctioneer, etc. at your event. I also do clinics for beginners and intermediates, all sorts of options. If there's something you'd like to chat about, just drop me an email, ryan@fleetwoodfarms.com. That's ryan@fleetwoodfarms.com. The filming, audio recording, and editing is done by Rodrigo, Henriquez, Shannon, Milligan, Jared Middlebrook from Starset Media. I want to thank my family for allowing me the time and the ability to do this. And folks, at this point, this is a cost and an ambition that I've taken on myself. If you would like to help support, you can do that at buymeacoffee.com/Ryan Fleetwood. Also, if you can subscribe, leave a like or a written review, or tell a friend or two about this podcast, those things help us out greatly. So please share it with others who you think will enjoy it. All the links are in the show description. The Quarter Horse Hauler is a production of myself, Ryan A. Fleetwood, and Starset Media. Thank you for listening to the Quarter Horse Hauler. We'll see you next time. I'm Ryan Fleetwood.